in the ear, it attracts attention. So God's desires are obvious to the eye, obvious to the ear, should be obvious to his chosen people. In a sense, God is saying, you are my chosen people. I brought you out of Egypt. I put you in the promised land. I gave you my law. What do you mean you don't know what I want? How have you lost your way and don't even know me anymore? So God's desires are obvious. When I think about missing something obvious, I'm reminded of the story I first heard in college, and my tech friend will appreciate this one. Man buys a computer, sets it up, pushes the power button. Nothing happens. Man looks at the instruction book, pushes the power button again. Nothing happens. Man calls tech support. They work on the computer for about a half hour. Nothing happens. Almost as an afterthought, the tech guy says, "Sir, did you plug the computer in?" Silence for a little while. Button being pushed, whirring noise. The man says, "Oh, yeah, that was it. Seems to be working fine now." Now, the story is kind of an even where the tech support guy gets removed, we'll leave that part off. But the key there is that the man was missing something obvious, something he should have known and didn't do. That's what God says about his desires for his chosen people. If we are God's chosen people, God has made his desires obvious to us. We should know what he wants. I run into this situation as a teacher sometimes. I teach science out at O'Fallon High School. And I remember giving a reading assignment in one of my classes this last year. I gave the instructions to the students. I've been teaching for a while, so I repeated the instructions. And I've been teaching, I think it was my 10th year I just finished, so I even wrote the instructions on the board. I was going to ask if there were any questions, but I thought that would probably be pushing it a little bit. I sit down, I start doing some work. About 10 minutes later, the student walks up, kind of sheepish. I think, well, this anatomy, it's pretty difficult stuff. Maybe he just doesn't understand reading. I say, I won't say his name. I say, "Hey, do you have a question?" He looks down, shuffles his feet. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Denny, what are we supposed to be doing right now?" I don't, maybe this was some of you in high school. Hopefully not, don't raise your hands. But I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking, wait a minute. I gave the instructions twice. I said, "What were you doing when I gave the instructions? What have you been doing for the last 10 minutes? He says, "I don't know. I guess I wasn't paying attention." This shows that he missed something obvious. He missed those instructions. But there was something added on to that. He was required to do that assignment. That wasn't a suggestion. That wasn't optional. And he faced a penalty for not getting it done. He got a 0 on that assignment because he didn't do it. This leads us to the second point about God's desires for his chosen people. God's desires are required. God's commands, God's desires are not suggestions to be considered. They are commands to be obeyed. Not only did Judah not know what they were supposed to do, they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. Let's think back to school. I don't require my students to know all the information the day that I give a lecture. That would be pretty awful. But I do expect them to know that information when it's quiz day or when it's test day. That's when they're required to show that they've learned that stuff. If they walk in during test day and don't know it, then they face a penalty. That's what God is telling his people. Not only are you ignorant of my commands, you're disobeying. These are things that you have to do, and you're not doing them. Not only that, we see the people trying to substitute their own way to righteousness. They might be saying, "God, we don't know what you want, but I gave 1 bull last year in the temple. What if I give 2 bulls this year? That's twice as much. That's pretty good. I gave 10 bushels of grain last year. What if I gave 15 this year? That's even more. That's a pretty good deal, right, God?" When I think of trying to barter or haggle with God, I'm reminded of the story in 1 Samuel 15. Saul, who was the first king of Israel, is commanded by God to destroy the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites were a pagan people. They were wicked. They were evil. God was worried if they lived in the same land as his chosen people, that their wickedness would rub off on his people. And that happened a lot in Israel's history. So God told Saul, "I want you to take my army and defeat the Amalekites. Not only that, I want you to kill their king, kill every man and woman and child alive. I want you to wipe out all their cattle. I want nothing left of this wicked people to be brought into the camp of Judah." So Saul wants to obey God, takes the army, leads him against the Amalekites. God delivers a mighty, mighty victory. But when Saul and the troops see how good, how beautiful the spoils are from the Amalekites, they take the best of the livestock. They take the best of what the Amalekites have. They even leave the king of the Amalekites alive as a war trophy and bring him back to their home. Samuel goes up to see Saul. Saul says, hey, Samuel, let's rejoice. I did what God wanted. Isn't that awesome? Samuel looks around. He says, if you did what God wanted, why do I hear the bleating of sheep? Why do I see all these livestock? What's the king of the Amalekites doing here if you did what God wanted? Saul tries to pass it off and say, well, the troops, they really like this stuff, and, I'm going to sacrifice it to God. That's what I'm going to take all this good stuff and sacrifice it to your God. He'll be happy about that, right? In some of the most poignant words in the Old Testament, Samuel tells him, look, to obey is better than sacrifice. To pay attention is better than the fat of rams. Saul lost his way. Saul got greedy and wanted to take what wasn't his, and then when he was called on it, tried to substitute his own righteousness for God's commands. Saul was rejected as king, and Saul was taken, his throne was taken away because of his disobedience. The point of that story is we must obey God. We have to do what he commands and not what we think is best. We see a tiny little spot of the picture of our lives. God sees the entire history of everything all at once. We have to trust him. So what we've learned is that God's desires are obvious and God's desires are required. Now, if we're going to be God's chosen people, that presents an important question. What are God's desires? If I want to be God's chosen people, and I don't want to disobey, I'm a good student, I like getting A's, I want to do the same thing with God. I don't want to disobey. How can I know God's desires? Well, the good news is God's desires never change. Micah tells the people in the last part of that verse that what God requires is this. They must do justly, they must love mercy or love faithfulness, and they must walk humbly with their God. Now, if we break those down, we said the people were corrupt. They have to do justly. In Micah chapter 6, verses 10 through 12, he says that the land is full of short measures, deceptive scales, and wicked weights. What that means is the merchants in that land were ripping people off. They would have false sets of weights. When they bought grain, they would use weights that make it seem like there was less than there really was, so they could pay less money. When they sold grain, they would use weights that made it seem like there was more than there was. So they were ripping off not only their suppliers, they were ripping off their customers. And Micah said that is wrong. This corruption is wrong. Stop taking advantage of the people. Micah tells us in chapter 3, verse 2, that's later, Micah 3, verse 11, that everyone in a position of authority was abusing that position of authority for their own personal gain. The leaders took bribes, the priests took payment, and the prophets accepted money to get whatever prophecy you wanted. Everyone was abusing the positions God had given them to lead his people for their own personal gain. If we think about it, in one sense that sounds a lot like America today. We live in a land that's corrupt, where people are abusing their positions of power for their own personal gain. But that's not all. Micah tells them they must love faithfulness or mercy. Now that one's a little harder to decode, but it means that people were not treating other people with love and with respect. Micah says in chapter 3, verse 2, when he describes his people, you tear off the skin of people, you strip the flesh from their bones. Now this isn't a zombie. People weren't really eating each other. That's stuff for George Romero, not for the Bible. But what Micah is saying is, you're treating your countrymen the way that you would treat the animals that you prepare for dinner. It's like you're chopping them up and throwing them in a pot so that you can consume them. You're not treating them with love. You're not treating them with respect. You're not treating them like God's chosen people. They're a means to an end for you, and God is tired of that and won't accept it anymore. Lastly, Micah says they have to walk humbly with their God. They have to recognize, first of all, they have to come back to God. We said they drifted apart. They lost their way. They needed to find their way back. And when they did, they had to lose that